But the reality is Donald Trump has spent his whole life, not just as president, but in the private sector, basically since he was about 20, hiding things. And he has never liked transparency. And why doesn't he like transparency? Because he does bad things routinely, large and small, whether it's financial malfeasance, whether it's hiding details about his health, whether it's hiding details about how he runs his administration. He hides everything, and it's the instincts of a mobster. The only people who go around routinely hiding things are worried about getting caught. And he is always worried about getting caught because he is always either pushing the limits of regulatory or legal boundaries or actually transgressing them, as we've seen him do time and time again in this administration. So anytime he says, I'm completely transparent, it's an Orwellian response, and when he should actually, anyone should, when they hear that, should say, actually, you're hiding things.
Right, and the most recent example, Rick, this plane switcheroo, it feels emblematic of the administration's overall approach to transparency. The New York Times notes this ruse, quote, stands out not only for its misdirection, but also for the way it shifted the evident peril to others and was kept secret long after Mr. Trump was out of harm's way. How should this have been handled, Rick?
You know, he hides everything, as Tim said, because he's committing transgressions. This is more than just hiding something and misdirection. This is an appalling moral lapse that he put hundreds of people's lives in danger, putting them on a decoy when he went on another plane. It could have been handled in any number of different ways. Could have taken the press into his confidence. He could have, once he left Turkish airspace on that other plane, they could have called the Iranians and say, hey, my guy is out of your airspace, don't blow up that other plane. But it's more than just this penchant for secrecy. It's a kind of callousness that reflects what we already know about him, that he's a narcissist. I mean, every scandal that sticks because the perception of the person about whom the scandal is general. We all know he's a narcissist. He behaved like a narcissist, and his narcissism put hundreds and hundreds of people in potentially harm's way, in part because he doesn't understand, speaking of secrecy, he doesn't understand the role of the press in a democracy, the role of the press pool as a symbol for the American people. He's the servant of the American people, and that's why he needs to level with them, and he does not.
This might not have been as big of a story, Jason Johnson, if the administration had to, as they often claim they are, actually been transparent with the American people. But their disregard for both the press and the people is apparent.
Yes, and look, we all know the phrase, it's like the cover-up is actually worse than the crime. Well, no, the crime was bad. Like, you were endangering people, and the cover-up is terrible. But this is replete throughout this administration. Think back to the tragedy at the White House Correspondents Center, right? What did we see? RFK Jr. left his wife, Stephen Miller. Like, that's what these guys do. These are not brave men from top to bottom. These are not courageous people under any circumstances. These are not people who are going to take a bullet for anyone, metaphorically, politically, let alone actually physically. So I'm not surprised by this behavior. I think the larger issue, though, and the thing that I have waited for and probably will never see, is the point at which the people who will be the victims of this cowardice, the reporters on that flight, are they going to take their jobs even more seriously now? They're going to be like, you know what? No more of this dancing around fluff pieces. These guys are monsters. They endangered my life. Are the Republicans who have seen Trump betray them over and over and over again to January 6 people, to terrorists, to trying to come up with slush fund, are they finally going to say, I'm tired of taking bullets for this guy who's not going to do anything for me? That's what I'm waiting for, because we know the mendacity of this administration. When are people going to get sick of it and start holding them accountable?
Well, and you have some of that reporting trickling out, Rick. You have reporting describing the threat as credible. However, the Washington Post reports that the CIA had low confidence in the Iranian threat intel provided by Israel. That's according to current and former U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence. And you have one source who told the Post they understood that Rubio was briefed on the Israeli threat intelligence, as well as the subterfuge plan by the Secret Service, and nonetheless opted to board the Legacy Air Force One. If Rubio knew about the threat, Rick, took the decoy flight anyway, does that tell you anything about the credibility of the threat?
I don't really know. I mean, we're talking about an administration that we've all agreed doesn't level with anybody, so I don't know about the level of the threat. I mean, the point about what Rubio knew and what Rubio did is this: there's a distinction between the press and the government employees, and particularly cabinet members. Cabinet members take an oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution, and they know when they are with the President of the United States, they're taking risks. I flew into Afghanistan. I flew into Iraq on military planes with the President and Secretary of State. You know you're at risk. But the press, when they're not informed and is not told of their risk, didn't accede to that, didn't consent to that. That's what's, again, I find so appalling about this. And as Jason said, I wish the press would protest more. Like, gee, you used me as a flying decoy and didn't tell us about it. So it's more than just transparency. It's full-fledged immorality.
Sam, part of what I'm trying to do and what I asked our producers to do was to stitch together a few of the stories that we're following all through the lens of this question of transparency, because I think it's easy to talk about the Epstein files in its own silo. It's easy to talk about what happened with this Iranian threat and the use of subterfuge and the fact that they were not transparent with the press about where the president was for a number of hours. But to me, it all exists under this larger umbrella of a president that claims to be the most transparent in history, but then will not even tell us the full story of his own health. You had Vice President Dick Cheney's former cardiologist writing an op-ed demanding more disclosures. He writes, Mr. Trump is probably the most photographed president in American history, and a variety of physical ailments are easy to see. He's had large bruises on both hands, swelling in his legs, and episodes when it appears that he is struggling to stay awake. He's also had advanced imaging performed for unclear reasons. The public is again left to wonder whether the nation's leader is okay. Sam, what does the public have a right to know?
Well, the public should have a right to know the basic health and status of the president of the United States. This gets back to what we're talking about. Look, on the Air Force One decoy stuff, I don't begrudge the president for taking a decoy aircraft if he thought the threat was credible. He has been shot at. That is true. He has been hit by a bullet. We don't know what his psyche is about these types of things, but he does have an obligation to try to make sure that the American public are informed of this, that they know that he had to do this. And he certainly has an obligation to at least give the people who are left on the decoy plane insights into the severity of the threat. And he doesn't care for that. That's the thing that he doesn't care for. And this, as your producers have stitched together, and as you note, spans across a variety of stories. The health stuff is remarkable. I mean, he has basically said, I am a Greek god. I have been checked out 4 or 5 different times. I passed cognitive tests every time with smashing success. But the actual amount of data that we're given about his medical condition is very sparse. And as this op-ed points out, the testing that he's done, what we know of it, just raises additional questions. Same holds true for his business acumen and financial reports, as Tim has copiously documented over the course of his career. We don't have an actual full understanding. Tim only knows because he had to go to court. And so he's created this facade about himself that he's some sort of invincible president who's a huge business success that we're just asked to believe. And then the last thing I'll say is, when they say they're the most transparent administration in history, what they mean is that he talks to the press more than any president in history. And that is true. He does talk to the press a lot. I don't think we should just dismiss it. I'm grateful that he does. But when he does talk to the press, it's filled with mistruths, misdirections, and lies. And that is not transparency at all.
I'm curious, Dr. Jason Johnson, when the White House keeps repeating over and over again, well, the bruises are on his hands or because he's shaking so many hands, which I'm also intrigued by because the man is doing more tele-rallies than he is actual in-person meetings. But let's put that aside. When he says that the Strait of Hormuz is open and that the U.S. controls the Strait of Hormuz, and Americans know that's not true just because they actually have to fill their tank and they know that the price of gas has not gone down. Who is the lie for? Who's supposed to be believing the lie? Who still takes them at their word?
Well, I think the lie, honestly, Alicia, the lie is for Trump himself. right? He needs to tell himself that sort of story. And I think, but this goes to this overall thing, not just with his finances, but his health, but understanding what the relationship is supposed to be when you are the president in serving the people. Look, there's thousands of things on TikTok and Instagram where people are like, he's got this, he's got that dementia. I've always thought, look, I'm not the man psychologist. I can't assess his psychology. I'm not a dermatologist. I don't know what any of these things mean. And, we're not in the age of warrior kings, right? We don't need Trump to go out and fight battles for us. He's not Kratos, god of war, right? But at the end of the day, if you have a president who is mentally unstable or physically incapable to the point where he may not be as good as he needs to be during negotiations for peace treaties, he may not be able to negotiate deals, that affects everybody's finances. That affects what you can do in Congress. We need to know the president's health because his physical health and his mental health has to do with our nation's overall financial and business and legislative health. And their refusal to acknowledge that